Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Hollander, Artistic Director and founder of Battery Dance. And anyone who's come on these Sunday Dance Diplomacy with Jonathan sessions will know that I usually am the person who's leading the interview with fantastic people around the world. And we've decided to turn the tables. And my friend Pia Catton is here, and she is going to be the interviewer, and I'm going to be interviewed. So take it away, Pia.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's so nice to talk with you. I'm really delighted to be here. I've been watching your dance diplomacy videos, and they're so rich. And also the festival, I really have to congratulate you on a wonderful festival. I have been on the curation panel now for, I think, 3 years. And every year it is so exciting to go through all of these submissions, to really dig in, see what the pulse of dance is, and then sit down with colleagues and discuss it and look at our scores. It's a very quantitative criteria that we use. But this year, of course, things were different, and we looked at loads of submissions, and then the festival was very different. You had an unbelievable mix of dancers that were shot and filmed at the Battery Dance site in Robert Wagner Jr. Park. And then you had pre-recorded dance, and you had dance on camera. I mean, this mix was great. So before we talk more about how you put this together in a pandemic, which I tip my hat to you, let's take a look. You've put together a short reel of this, and it's fantastic. So let's take a look. That was really great to see, Jonathan. Beautiful. So can you tell us a little about how you put this festival together? And let's talk first about the content, and then we'll get to the logistics, because I know that was a huge lift.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, Pia, everything changed. March 13th, 2020 was the day when it became clear that everything was going to stop in terms of live performances, people going to theaters, dance companies rehearsing. And yet we had all of the material for the Battery Dance Festival that you and your other curators had put together for us. We began to work remotely and to try to grapple with what could we provide for the public that would be exciting, that would be unique, that wouldn't just get lost in the mix of what became a huge traffic jam of online programming. And in fact, there was a worry that we had at a certain point that it wouldn't stand out. The festival would just become one more, series of programs among too many. So I have to credit the Battery Dance staff with the very hard work and the learning curve. I mean, we had no idea how to do a film festival. We were not a film festival, we were a dance festival. And so we had to learn how to do that. And it became clear that there were certain themes that we could rally around in terms of night after night. Now, you know, Pia, that we always focus on Indian dance.
Yes, one day of the festival is always devoted to Indian dance, correct?
That's right. And so August 15th is always within the week that we choose for our festival, August 15th, India Independence Day. So that one, Raji Kapoori, who is a friend and a a scholar, a dancer, a teacher, and somebody who really has a grasp of Indian dance writ large. She and I worked on the curation of that program. And then the Women's Right to Vote, the centennial, which happened, you know, right in the middle of those days of the festival. Catherine Theron from the 92nd Street Y had already curated a program. And we ran into some problems there because a lot of what she had compiled was not high resolution. It was not broadcast quality. And so we lost a lot of artists that we would have liked to include. And maybe that's something we have to revisit and look at with more time. I mean, there was no time. We were...
Right. When did you start putting things together?
Well, I guess March 13th was when the first idea came clear. Although I will say in March and April, we thought we're going to be the first live thing in New York because we're outdoors and everybody will be able to sit on, you know, at Robert Wagner Park and there's enough wind and open air. Well, of course, that wasn't the case. New York is still not ready for people to gather shoulder to shoulder, even outdoors. So
I do think it was surprising to be able to walk down there and see you all on the stage when, as a resident of New York, I knew that the park department was not allowing any permits. So to see that stage in its familiar place, right at Battery Park, was just a moment that really lifted my heart, I have to say. And it was able to be done because it's a state park.
Battery Park City Authority, our partners over the last, ever since Superstorm Sandy drenched Lower Manhattan and kind of changed everything for us, where we went from an art in the workplace at noontime on corporate plazas that were underwater to Wagner Park, where there's no shade. So going from the lunchtime to the evening and going to a location we'd never used before, and then finding that audiences loved that location and flocked to that location. We had bigger audience than we ever had before. So it was a complete luck.
What changes did you have to adapt to when you went from being an afternoon festival to being an evening festival?
Well, for one thing, if it weren't for Battery Park City Authority, we couldn't have done it because we needed lighting. Right. And, you know, so there was an expense on top of expense. You know, to do an outdoor festival like this, you need to rent a stage, tents for changing, chairs for some of the audience that can't sit perch on the ground because of age or whatever. And then in the evening, when the sun sets, you need lights to come up to illuminate the dancers. And actually, I have to say that's one of the most beautiful things, is to sit there and watch the sky change, because we're New Yorkers, we're running around like crazy normally. And I find that it is like being in a different zone that I've never experienced the entire year, where I actually sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours and watch the sky change and the dancers, you know, against that beautiful tapestry, that background. It's so unique. So we wanted that. We wanted to preserve that, and that's what you saw when but oh my gosh, what we had to go through in order to film, in order to be the first and only staged, filmed outdoor performances in New York. And 10 companies were filmed out there.
Fantastic.
So Battery Park City Authority, it was the partnership with them that made it possible, dealing with the local police precinct. You know, everybody worked together to make that happen.
I was fortunate enough to come down and watch one morning, and I was surprised that you had tilted the stage a bit. Why did you have to tilt the stage?
We had to tilt the stage because Barry Steele, our technical director, went down to the park before the festival and got a bead on where is the sun coming up. Is it going to be blinding the dancers because it's coming straight into their eyes? And so by tilting it, the cameras were able to get the water view, but the dancers were not facing directly into the sun that was coming from here. So that's why we did that.
So
And
you've
we
got,
have to mention also, you must have noticed that there were 3 doctors sitting on the side, um, you know, in chairs. We had Weill Cornell medical staff on hand at the park every morning in case, you know, temperature checks were being done. If you were within the cordon, you had to be wearing a mask. I mean, you should have been wearing a mask anyway, but, you know, and only when the dancers went on stage did they take off their masks. And then, of course, the air and the, you know, we just trusted that with the temperature checks and people taking tests and so forth, that no one was symptomatic. And we got through that. No one got sick.
wonderful.
Amazing.
Usually your programming will include quite a number of dance companies from the international scene. Were you able to have any come in for this festival?
No, in fact, even some of the local companies, you know, dancers and every one of us, some people left the city when the pandemic, you know, was extended, and they were like, I can't pay my rent, or I need to go home and take care of my family or my parents or whatever. So some of the companies really had an issue with getting their dancers back to New York, and also at a comfort level, you know, I think we're emotionally and psychologically traumatized by this situation, and dancers who are used to being together and close, and the intimacy is just built into the art form. They had to believe that it would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So actually,
Also,
yeah.
I am so impressed by the dancers who at this point had not been on stage probably since March, right? I mean, it happened in August. It was a huge amount of time to not be on stage. And I don't know how they stayed fit that whole time. I mean, that's a remarkable.
That is a really good question. It's very hard if you're in a small apartment to keep the strength and the, you know, that dance body and dance energy that you're talking about. And we did think about that with our own, we had a premiere. And we had been getting that ready for a tour to Nigeria, a State Department tour, which didn't happen. But it wasn't finished, and we had to finish it. Razvan Stoyan choreographed it, and Bethany Mitchell and Sean Scantleberry and Jill Linkowski and Vive Kam Singh Savath. They were the dancers, and they weren't ready. I mean, they needed rehearsal. So coming back into our studio with squares marked out on the floor, windows open, air conditioning on, masks and all of that, it was a leap of faith. They did it.
Congratulations on doing it.
Thank you.
Now that you've mentioned Nigeria, let's talk about your international work, which has really taken you and Battery Dance Company all over the world. I mean, it's really, truly impressive what you have done in the area of dance diplomacy and using the arts to connect with people around the world. And I understand that you are developing Dancing to Connect virtually. And so maybe tell me how Dancing to Connect, tell me how Dancing to Connect has changed and what it will look like in a virtual format.
So Dancing to Connect is our signature arts education program, as you know, and it started in New York City public schools and in Germany and Cambodia, and eventually spiraled out so that it's been done in over 50 countries around the world. And in Germany, in 26 cities, in Greece, it's gone on for 7 years, etc. And the basic thumbnail idea of Dancing to Connect is that we give young people the tools of choreography, whether or not they have had any formalized dance training. We basically say everyone is a dancer, you just don't know it, we'll help you find out. And we give them the tools of choreography, and in 20 hours, groups of 20 young people make their own piece of choreography with the stewardship and mentorship and sort of task making of our teaching artists. Well, we're supposed to go to Germany. We were supposed to go in June, July. We had 6 federal states programs that were going to happen. Obviously they didn't. So we will start in October in Germany with our virtual program.
Oh,
And we've had to think so carefully and so methodically about how to do this, because we're not going to be physically present. And in different schools, there are probably going to be different models that we have to roll out. For example, in some regions of Germany, the infection rate is very low. So students are coming back to school as normal, and they're not even wearing masks in the school, and they don't even need to social distance because there's like one case in 1,500 people. And you know, it's so low that they're able to do that for now. That could change anytime. So the idea is in that school or that kind of school, we can have a screen, a projector, our dancer is on the screen, the dancers are in the gym, they can work together. In some cases, we're assuming that students will be doing their school virtually, and they will each have to be on their cell phones or their devices, whatever they might have. So we have to be ready for all of those different formulations. And I think the technical piece is very, very, just like it was a steep learning curve for our festival to go virtual, it's going to be we're in the midst of a steep learning curve with the program going virtual.
well, in the videos that you have posted where you are interviewing people around the world, many of them have talked about the opportunities to create new projects or innovation that they had not expected. I love the story of Nilufar in Bombay, who runs a very successful program, it sounds like, to train people for Indian wedding dances. And she was saying that taking this virtual works. There are still weddings going on and she can still give lessons online. I loved that. So
it's amazing. Yeah, Terrence Lewis is the company that she works for, and Terrence is, I think because Terrence is such an oversized personality, he's a celebrity. He's on television with his own shows. He's the Simon Cowell in a much nicer version of a Simon Cowell in a Dance India Dance kind of a competition program. But at heart, he's a dancer, choreographer. He teaches in Vienna every summer at the Tanz Impulse, Impulse Tanz, I forgot the name. But at any rate, weddings will go on. People aren't going, I think she used the expression, people just want to get on with this. So they want to get married, and they don't want to get married with two people in masks. They want to have a presence of their family and their friends. So yeah, I mean, I think if they can go virtual with a wedding, then we can go virtual with Dancing to Connect.
Absolutely. Another one of your videos brought to the fore a diplomat who had said that, using dance in the diplomatic world is a tool. It is this wonderful art form that can cross all language barriers, and it really gives people a chance to interact, to get to know another culture, and it's a two-way exchange very often.
Right.
It's a tool. And, I always have looked at the idea of diplomacy as being something kind of, as a civilian, I think of diplomacy as being something cliched and cloak and dagger, but dance can be a tool, and there are
you might wear a cloak as part of your costume.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think what I have come to believe is that dance, and especially contemporary dance, modern dance, with the freedom to create your own vocabulary of movement, Martha Graham, Isadora Duncan, you name it, Twyla Tharp, people coming up with, nobody gave them permission to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was an expression of their own bodies, their own voices creatively. And I feel like that's one of the things that's very American.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think I'm a diplomat, I'm representing the United States in whatever country, what do I want to say about my country? What do I want to share about my country? I think that this idea of creativity, of the power of an individual to make something without being given permission by formal authorities, so to speak. I think that it feels like this is a very powerful tool for expressing the American spirit.
Wonderful. Your video series has also highlighted some Americans as well. You had Junius Brickhouse, who is just a fascinating person. I loved him talking about, where do you find dance? And of course, right now, it's hard to find dance in your physical life, but there's so much that you can connect with online. What are you feeling in terms of how will people kind of take that experience, all this online content that we are so able to have and watch at any time? Is that going to settle into people's minds and make them kind of dance fans now, or is it just
so
the next thing?
I referenced Dance in America, the public television Great Performances series that brought the Joffrey Ballet and great dancers of many different genres to the public in a much broader sense than any theater performance season could have done. And I remember when it first came out and people were really debating, dance companies were thinking that it would rob them of ticket revenues, that people can see it on TV, they're not going to buy tickets, but it of course had the opposite effect, that people discovered dance through the television, and then they wanted to see more. And actually that relates back to our festival, that I have always wanted to have a lot of different, the sort of whole panorama of genres available in our festival. I mean, we can't do it every year, but flamenco, classical ballet, very, very edgy contemporary, ethnic dance, i.e. Mopato dance theater from Botswana, whatever. I love it all. Dance is so in my blood, and I don't want to be limited to one genre. And I feel like it's a great way to build the audience for any and all forms of dance, to show great dance at the festival. And now, I mean, we had 52 films in our festival this year. And on any given program, like the India program had 10 different slices, and people could say there was some skepticism from certain quarters at the beginning saying, that's too short, our art form takes an hour, takes all night to really absorb.
No. Oh, don't make it an hour. I love a short ballet. I love a short contemporary dance.
Well, after the fact, nobody complained that things were too short. So I think
no one's ever going to complain that things are too short. No.
Well, culturally, it's different. Yeah.
Yes.
But going back to dance and diplomacy, I mean, one of the things that I think the average person does not know, that a lot of American diplomats who take up the cultural side of things, not the econ or political, they're in the cultural, they're in public diplomacy, what it's called. And culture is part of that, education is part of that. So there is a cone within the State Department, and people are trained in culture and trained in education, and they are our partners overseas. So you met Phil Breeden, you met Cynthia Schneider, who was a former ambassador to the Netherlands. Rachel Cooper of Asia Society, her title has to do with cultural diplomacy. So there are people who specialize in this field, and they do understand how powerful the arts can be. And I remember we were in Athens at the Onassis Cultural Center, Opera House, magnificent place, doing a Dancing to Connect program. And the US ambassador, in his opening remarks at the beginning of the program, said something like, it's such a relief to me to be able to introduce a program where I know there will be no controversy, and also, our dance company is multicultural. It always has been. And so ambassadors have also pointed to the fact that there's a harmonious ensemble of dancers, the Battery Dance, and they come from all over. They are a snapshot of New York City, a snapshot of the United States in terms of our multiculturalism, which is not common in many countries around the world, and it may not be the perception that people have of America. So I think just going back to why certain officers understand the power of programming dance, that's just one of the reasons.
Now, one of your programs is just absolutely fantastic because I think that it really encapsulates a lot of your work. You had an interview with 3 Syrian men in Germany, which of course is a country where you are nearly royalty there. The Germans have a lot of respect for you.
It goes both ways. But yes, they did. On my birthday 2 years ago, they gave me the Bundesverdienstkreuz, which is the Federal Order of Merit. But really, that was for Battery Dance and the efforts that we've made working in 26 cities in Germany. But also, as you're pointing out, the 3 Syrian dancers who I interviewed are people who have made their way in a new country. Can you imagine? I mean, the language, the culture, the food, the clothing, the climate, the way that people react to each other, and yet they have made professional careers. Like, they weren't 18 years old. They were into their careers in Syria when war broke out. And they made their way to Germany in different ways. Each one had a different pathway, and each one is doing a different thing in the country. But it's just so impressive to me. I find that people who can remake their lives in a new country, not dwell on what could have been that wasn't, but at the same time look forward and create new work. I mean, yeah. So they have been translating for us and taking on the skills of running Dancing to Connect programs as teacher trainees. But really, it's become more and more of a partnership. And in fact, in the last iteration that we did in the fall of 2019, we had them perform on stage as well as our own company, as well as, of course, the student groups. So it was this really beautiful, amazing mélange of different cultures. And for these full houses in Germany of community people, seeing refugees, Syrian refugees on stage, magnificent dancers, seeing their own students, their own children, their own community performing on stage, and the Battery Dance. So yeah, I mean, it's funny, it seems like a different world than when we were.
So much of the conversation in your videos comes back to identity. You know, a lot of people are able through dance to explore their own identity or seek an expression of truth. In Junius Brickhouse's video, he really talks about using hip hop to express truth. And you put it out there, here is my truth, and here is what I want to share with you. This is what I know. But I also picked that up along the way with people saying, well, this time in quarantine has allowed me some time to sit and think about myself and my goals. What do I want to do in the world? And I feel like that kind of thinking now in quarantine, and also that kind of time and space that you give people through Dancing to Connect, is what can kind of broaden our minds and broaden the it can broaden the thoughts that we have about each other, right? I mean, if I think of German dance, I might not think of Syrians in Germany. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate knowing
And yet, if you were living in Berlin and you had a Sunday afternoon, you might go to the old Tempelhof airfield, which is now a public space, and do a Debka workshop with one of these dancers. Everybody shoulder to shoulder, going around in this circle, learning this Middle Eastern dance. Fantastic. Yeah,
I mean, it really is dancing that brings us together and allows us to connect. So you did find a perfect title for your program.
And the poster behind me, right there, those are that group of students in Freiburg, Germany, in the first iteration, first 2 years that we did Dancing to Connect, they are responsible for the way that my mind changed radically. I was much more conservative before I saw those kids, and I saw them take over, and they didn't start out as dancers. They didn't have their identity as dancers. They were general ed students, good students. And they took up the challenge of the Dancing to Connect, and they made beautiful artworks. And this was the radical, boom, 90-degree for me, where I stopped thinking that you had to have extensive dance training. You know, I was kind of Balanchine. He was a master of playing the piano, of music, he himself a very fine ballet dancer. And then it all, he was able to do this magnificent thing that Balanchine did. So I kind of was under that idea that you can't choreograph unless you have a vocabulary of movement. Well, everyone has a vocabulary of movement. And when I saw these kids with their passion and their movement, like just driven with authority, I said, I don't want to see a professional dancer do that. I want to see that kid do that, because that has just made tears come into my eyes. So, people ask, like, for me, this is 45 years of battery dance. And what drives me, why do I do it? How do I feel about my identity? And I was a pianist. I was a whatever I was until I found dance. And then I was a dancer, choreographer, artistic director, and kind of entrepreneur now, in the sense of making things happen, but letting other people do it. I'm so happy with those transitions. None of the transitions were painful for me. And so to me, dance has been a turnkey, a license for lots and lots of happiness and lots of very happy moments of people relating to each other. As you said, people relating to each other. We've known each other for how many? 15, 20, 25, I don't know. You've gone through a lot of transitions in your own life.
Sure. Some of them have been painful. You've been lucky.
I think I have been lucky. Yeah, I do.
Well, I also really see the benefit of the expanded worldview that you've had. I mean, when people create a company and they set it up, a lot of times it's very hard to give up the sole choreographer role. But Jonathan, you really expanded beyond. You've encouraged a lot of your dancers to become choreographers. And like you've said, you've encouraged and created a way that children can make their own work in some of the hardest, most heartbreaking situations in the world. They get this one moment, this workshop to express themselves. And Dancing to Connect is, I feel like, a project that if more children had it in the world, we might be in a better place. And on that note,
I'm not going to argue.
That wasn't a question. Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's really a pleasure to talk with you and interview you again.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.